Good evening. Well, we've talked about the five elements, earth, water, air, fire, and spirit. Now, there is a problem with them is we are looking when we think about the world in those forms, we are following the Greek method. And if you are following a Greek path, that is a wonderful thing for you. Keep on doing it. But I follow a Celtic path, and so the Celts looked at things very different. You see, when I first started my pagan path, I concentrated on the elements. Had to assign, is this a earth, water, air, fire, or is this spirit? Do I need this tool to represent earth and such and so forth? The problem we have with that is that we are dissecting everything. We're breaking everything down into core components. And that's a great way to start off, but we must think in bigger, grander terms. And the Celts had a wonderful concept, and I would like to talk to you a little bit about that tonight. You see, the Celts divided the world into three realms: the sky, the earth, and the water. And so each realm had parts of the other of the basic elements. Now you're thinking, of course, well, what about fire? Fire is not a realm. Fire is a catalyst. Fire brings change. Fire can boil water. Fire can burn the land. Fire can bring smoke to the sky. Fire just changes everything. Okay. Now we have many creatures that represent these single realms and multiple realms. And what I mean is Earth. Now let's think of a creature that exhibits attributes, just represents Earth very well. And the first one I think of is the bear. I mean, we're talking, it is big, it's strong, and it will find a den, a cave to sleep in for hibernation. It is of Earth. But then we do have creatures that do earth and water. The first one I think of is the otter. Now this is a creature that has to sleep on land, has to breathe, so it can't just live in the water. But in the water, it is beautiful, it is graceful, it eats sea life. It is a cute, wonderful creature. And then we have a lot of creatures that represent air. A nice, we're thinking about the birds, insects, but plants as well. I mean, how many of us, when we're kids, peeled the dandelions and blew the seeds everywhere? Or grabbed a cattail and, enjoyed ripping it apart and having that fuzz go everywhere? Well, these are land, air, and these all represent multiple realms. Now, the Celts believed that the sky realm is where the gods lived. The earth realm is where us mortal people lived. And then the underworld is the sea. And that was an interesting concept. And when I first read about that a few years ago, it was kind of hard for me to grasp that because, I was reading all the pagan books and, they were dividing everything up in the four elements, and then to think about it in realms where you have a combination of everything, it is amazing. So what I would like you to do is, contemplate this. Think about how your area is divided up into the different elements, and it creates its own realm. A realm would be like an environment. Now you see, I have also went through this transformation with my altar. The center of my altar, I had a Celtic cross, and I had each of my elements represented on the various arms of the Celtic cross, with a snowflake agate heart in the center to represent Akasha, or spirit. But I finally decided that I need to step beyond that, because I was so anal retentive on the elements, I was forgetting about the gods and the goddesses. And as I stress, you got to have a relationship with the gods and the goddesses. And so I felt that was starting to affect my relationships with the deities. And so I'm pushing it aside more. Another important aspect to think about, and that is culling the quarters. Now, in some of the research that I have done, they're saying that this is relatively a new thing to do. That it was not the way the old school magicians, witches, druids did. Culling the quarters was like 1950s from what some of the research I've done has stated. And so you cast your circle, but you don't have to call the quarters. But I want you to do your research on this too, because my research is not complete. But I do want to give that little tidbit of information to you. Because this is all part of the rebirth of paganism through Wicca. And so if you're wanting to do a more non-Wiccan old school magic, you might want to consider casting your circle, but without calling the quarters. Okay, so I'm going to show you now my altar, and maybe it can give you some ideas. So thank you very much. Take care. Be at peace. Well, this is my new altar setup. And like I said, this is my new centerpiece that I just made last night. It has Lord and the Lady on it, representations of the female and the male. On this, I will keep my Adame and my wand. Above my altar is what people call their pinnacle. This is a handmade item that I made out of large copper pipe. It is on a chain so I can wear it around my neck during rituals. This is some of my artwork. Not the greatest, but this is something that I drew, and I used, I believe it was colored pencils to just add some color to it. This is to remind me about how to ground in center, to become like a tree and become part of the earth and part of the sky. This right here is one of my paintings. I took an old piece of plywood and I painted a pond or lake picture on it. The reasoning for this is a reminder. You see, our temperament is like a pond, a lake. It is as tranquil as you let it be. If you're throwing stones into it, you're getting angry, you're getting irritable, you're creating ripples. And so you want to protect your pond.
See, this pond is surrounded by trees, and so it's very hard for the wind to come around. It's harder for people to walk by and throw rocks into it. Thus, my temperament, my pond, my lake is tranquil and peaceful. This is about harmony, and it is a wonderful thing. Also on my altar, I have my crystal ball right here. This is my mojo bag. I got a Celtic cross on it. Some of the items that I keep in it are some geodes right here. This is also a piece of copper. It was cut out, as you can tell. It's pretty old, and it's nature scene. And I use the copper itself to be like the bark of the tree. It's to envision life. You could say this is the tree of life. This piece right here is a touchstone. If you can see, it's got a groove in it. Now what you're supposed to do is set it in your hand like this, and when you're upset, you're supposed to rub your thumb in the impression, and it's supposed to relax you. It is made out of sardonyx. And this piece right here, this is my druid egg. Excuse me. You can see the ribbon that's in the middle, and also, just like the touchstone, I could put my thumb across it. It just has that natural feel to it. And for the Druids, this was a way to work out problems. It was illegal for Druids to have their Druid egg in like court decisions because it supposedly gave them an unfair advantage. I created 3 coins, also out of the same piece of copper. Triquetra, an A-win, and a tricycle. This is, Venturite with an owl on it. I love birds of prey, and the owl represents wisdom, so I always try to keep that nearby. This heart here, this is an important thing to me. This, if I remember right, it's called snowflake agate. As you can see, this particular stone is almost balanced perfectly between light and dark. My path is about balance, and so this kind of represented what is important to me. Balance. Okay, right over here I got my 3 pieces of quartz. I got this green heart. I got it the same day I got my big heart there, and I always carry that with me because, you know, it's like for Druids, they love the dark color green, and it's like the, you know, like life. So I always kept that with me. Right there is my chalice, my mortar and pestle, my candles. Another one of my candles. This is what I use to represent fire. Right here is my Druidcraft Tarot deck, and that is the top part of my altar. Also right next to my altar I have my nice staff, and I also keep my sword handy. Hopefully you can see this part here. This is a glass display case with some various rocks and stones around it, 2 candles. Inside of it is a wooden figurine that I made to represent me. It has 2 fake trees and some colored glass to represent earth and water. So this is what I use to represent me. Kind of cute in its own way, but and that is the basics of my altar. Like I said, that My new stand for my altar will always hold my wand and my atabey.